The sun had long vanished behind the towering pines, casting the ancient forest into an eerie twilight gloom. But for the old tribal leader, the darkening darkness meant nothing. His eyes, weathered by countless winters, had grown accustomed to the dim light of the wilderness. He sat cross-legged on a worn bearskin, his wizened face deep in thought, waiting patiently for the one they called the hairy man to appear. The old man had felt the creature's presence in the trees, a subtle shift in the air, a whisper on the wind. He knew the Bigfoot would come, drawn by an unseen force as ancient as the land itself. And when the massive figure finally emerged from the shadows, the tribal elder met its gaze with a calm, unflinching resolve. For a long moment, the two simply studied each other in silence, the man small and frail, the beast towering and powerful. Then, to the elder's astonishment, the Bigfoot lowered its head in a gesture of deference, as if recognizing the old one's authority. Slowly, it sank down onto its haunches, its deep-set eyes fixed unwaveringly on the tribal leader. "You have summoned me," the creature rumbled, its voice a low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through the very earth. "I have come to share what I know." The elder nodded, feeling a sense of both wonder and trepidation. "Then speak, hairy man," he said, his own voice surprisingly steady. "Tell me what you know of the great flood that destroyed our people long ago." The Bigfoot's gaze grew distant, as if it were peering into the mists of a distant past. "It was a time of great upheaval," it began, "when the world itself seemed to tremble and groan. The seas rose, swallowing the land, and the skies opened, pouring down a torrent of water that knew no end." The tribal elder listened, his heart pounding, as the creature described the cataclysmic events that had unfolded centuries ago. According to the Bigfoot, the Great Flood had been no mere natural disaster, but the culmination of a cosmic struggle between powerful, unseen forces that had been raging since the dawn of time. "The gods were at war," the Bigfoot rumbled, "and the world was their battleground. The forces of light and dark, of creation and destruction, clashed with a fury that shook the very foundations of the earth." The old man's eyes widened as he heard the details, scarcely daring to believe what he was being told. The Bigfoot spoke of ancient deities, of celestial beings that had once walked the earth, of a cosmic balance that had been dangerously disrupted. And at the center of it all was a betrayal, a vengeful act of treachery that had set the stage for the cataclysmic events to come. "The Great Flood was no accident," the creature rumbled, its eyes burning with an ancient, primal intensity. "It was the consequence of a terrible imbalance, a disruption in the natural order that had been orchestrated by those who sought to remake the world in their own image." The tribal elder listened, his mind reeling, as the Bigfoot revealed the shocking truth about the events that had led to the devastation of his people's homeland. He heard tales of powerful sorcerers and dark rituals, of ancient artifacts imbued with unimaginable power, of a battle for the very soul of the world. And as the story unfolded, the old man began to understand the true significance of the Bigfoot's presence. This was no chance encounter, no mere chance meeting of two solitary beings in the wilderness. The creature had come to him with a purpose, to share a truth that had been hidden for generations, a truth that could change the course of his people's history forever. The Bigfoot's eyes narrowed, and it leaned in closer, its breath a warm, musky presence on the air. "You must listen carefully, old one," it rumbled, "for what I tell you now could mean the difference between the survival of your people and their ultimate destruction." The tribal elder felt a shiver of apprehension run down his spine, but he nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I am listening," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And as the Bigfoot began to speak once more, the old man felt the weight of the world upon his shoulders, for he knew that the fate of his people now rested in his hands. The old man's heart pounded as the Bigfoot's words sank in. A cosmic battle between ancient deities? A betrayal that had led to the Great Flood? His people's very survival hanging in the balance? It was almost too much to comprehend. But the tribal elder knew he had to focus, had to understand the gravity of what the creature was telling him. Leaning forward, he fixed the Bigfoot with an intense gaze. "What must I do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. The Bigfoot's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the old man thought he saw a flicker of uncertainty in their depths. "There is an artifact," the creature rumbled, "an ancient relic that holds the key to restoring the balance that was disrupted so long ago." The elder felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly tempered by the Bigfoot's next words. "But the artifact is hidden, guarded by powerful forces that will stop at nothing to keep it from falling into the wrong hands." The creature's massive head turned, scanning the darkened forest as if searching for unseen threats. "You must retrieve it before it's too late." "Where can I find this relic?" the old man asked, his heart racing with the weight of what was being asked of him. The Bigfoot's gaze locked with him once more, and the elder was struck by the intensity of the creature's expression. "Deep within the heart of the mountain," it rumbled, "in a place where the very fabric of the world is thinnest." The tribal leader felt a chill run down his spine. "The mountain of the dead," he breathed, the words barely audible. The Bigfoot nodded, its eyes burning with an ancient, primal fire. "You know the place."
The old man's mind raced as he recalled the legends surrounding the ominous peak, a sacred yet feared site where the boundaries between the living and the dead were said to blur. It was a place of great power, but also of great peril, and few who ventured there ever returned. "The journey will be fraught with danger," the Bigfoot warned, as if sensing the elder's trepidation. "Dark forces will seek to stop you, and the very mountain itself will test your resolve." The tribal leader felt a surge of fear, but he steeled himself, determined to see this through. "I will go," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The Bigfoot nodded, a glimmer of something akin to respect in its eyes. "Then you must leave at once. Time is of the essence." The old man started to rise, but then a sudden, terrifying realization struck him. "What of my people?" he asked, his voice laced with anguish. "If I fail, if I do not return—" The Bigfoot's expression darkened, and the elder felt a chill of foreboding. "Your people will be doomed," the creature rumbled, its voice heavy with a grave finality. The old man's heart sank, and for a moment he felt as if the weight of the world was crushing him. But then a steely resolve hardened in his gaze, and he straightened his shoulders. "Then I have no choice," he said, his voice resolute. "I will go to the mountain of the dead and retrieve the artifact, no matter the cost." The Bigfoot nodded, a glimmer of approval in its eyes. "You are brave, old one," it said, "and your people are fortunate to have you." The tribal elder felt a surge of both pride and trepidation. "When must I leave?" he asked. "Now," the Bigfoot rumbled, rising to its full, towering height. "The forces that seek to destroy your people are already in motion. You must not delay." The old man nodded, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts and fears. But before he could speak, a sudden earth-shaking tremor rocked the forest, causing the very ground to tremble beneath their feet. The Bigfoot's eyes widened, and it let out a guttural roar, a sound that sent a chill down the tribal elder's spine. "They are coming," the creature bellowed, its massive frame tensing as if ready to pounce. The old man's heart hammered in his chest as he scanned the shadowed trees, half expecting to see some terrible, otherworldly horror emerge from the darkness. But then, a deafening crack echoed through the forest, and the elder watched in horror as a massive, ancient tree suddenly toppled, its trunk splintering with a thunderous crash. And from the swirling dust and debris, a figure emerged, a towering, humanoid shape, its features obscured by the gloom, but its presence unmistakable. The Bigfoot let out a bone-chilling roar, its massive frame bristling with primal fury. "Demon!" it bellowed, its voice a guttural, earth-shaking growl. The tribal elder felt his blood run cold as the creature advanced, its movements fluid and menacing. He knew in that moment that this was no mere animal, but something far more sinister, a being of pure, unadulterated evil. "You will not have the artifact," the Bigfoot bellowed, its massive frame blocking the old man from the approaching threat. The elder's heart pounded in his ears as he watched the two titans clash, their battle a blur of teeth, claws, and bone-shattering impacts. The very air seemed to crackle with the force of their struggle, and the old man felt a surge of terror, knowing that he was caught in the middle of a cosmic war beyond his understanding. And then, just as the Bigfoot seemed to be gaining the upper hand, a sickening crack echoed through the forest, and the elder watched in horror as the creature's massive frame crumpled to the ground, its eyes glazed with pain and defeat. The tribal leader felt a scream of anguish rise in his throat, but it died on his lips as the towering, demonic figure turned its attention to him, its gaze a piercing, predatory stare that seemed to bore into his very soul. The old man's legs trembled, and he knew in that moment that he was utterly powerless against this ancient, unholy force. He had come to the forest seeking answers, but now he found himself face to face with a darkness beyond his wildest nightmares, a darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. As the demon shadow loomed over him, the tribal elder felt a shiver of pure, unadulterated terror. He knew in that moment that his quest to save his people had only just begun, and that the true battle, the one that would determine the fate of his entire world, was yet to come. The old man's heart pounded in his chest as the towering demon loomed over him, its menacing presence casting a dark shadow across the forest floor. He knew in that moment that he was utterly powerless against this ancient, unholy force, a darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. But just as the demon's gaze bore into him, a sudden blinding light pierced the gloom, and the elder shielded his eyes, stunned by the unexpected brilliance. When the spots finally cleared from his vision, the old man blinked in disbelief, for the demon had vanished, and in its place stood a figure that filled him with both wonder and dread. "Grandfather," the tribal leader whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. The figure before him nodded, his familiar features illuminated by a faint, otherworldly glow. "It is I, my child," he said, his voice warm and comforting, yet tinged with a profound sorrow. The elder felt a surge of relief, but it was quickly tempered by a growing sense of unease. How is this possible?" he asked, his eyes searching the old man's face for answers. A deep sadness settled across the elder's features, and he placed a weathered hand on the tribal leader's shoulder. "There is much I must explain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But first, we must leave this place. The demon will return, and we cannot afford to be caught unawares." The old man nodded, his mind racing as he followed his grandfather's lead, weaving through the shadowed trees and deeper into the ancient forest. They walked in silence for what felt like an eternity, the only sounds the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant call of some unseen creature. Finally, they reached a small, secluded clearing where a flickering fire cast a warm glow across the mossy ground. The elder gestured for the tribal leader to sit, and the two men settled down, their gazes locked in a moment of profound understanding. "Grandfather," the old man began, his voice heavy with emotion, I don't understand. How can you be here? You've been gone for so many years, and we thought you were lost to us forever." The elder's eyes filled with a deep sorrow, and he reached out to gently grasp the tribal leader's hand. "My child, I have never truly been gone," he said, his voice laced with a deep regret. "I have been watching over you, over all of our people, from a place beyond your understanding." The tribal leader's brow furrowed in confusion. "Beyond our understanding?" he echoed, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. His grandfather sighed, his gaze drifting off into the flickering flames. "The world is not as it seems, my child," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. "There are forces at work, ancient powers that have been shaping the course of our history since the beginning of time." The old man felt a shiver of apprehension run down his spine. "The Bigfoot spoke of such things," he murmured, his mind replaying the creature's chilling revelations. "It told me of a cosmic battle, of deities and dark rituals that led to the Great Flood." His grandfather nodded, a grim expression settling across his weathered features. "Yes, the Bigfoot spoke truly," he said, his voice low and solemn. "But there is more, much more, that you do not yet know."
The tribal leader leaned forward, his eyes burning with a desperate need for understanding. "Then tell me, grandfather," he pleaded. "Tell me what you know, what you've seen. I must understand, for the fate of our people hangs in the balance." The elder's gaze grew distant, and for a moment, the tribal leader saw a glimmer of the ancient wisdom that had once made his grandfather such a revered figure among their people. "The Bigfoot was right," the old man began, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Great Flood was no mere natural disaster, but the culmination of a cosmic struggle that has raged since the dawn of time. It was a battle between the forces of light and dark, of creation and destruction, and our people were caught in the crossfire." The tribal leader listened, his heart pounding, as his grandfather recounted the ancient tale of betrayal and cataclysmic upheaval.
He heard of powerful sorcerers, of dark rituals and unholy pacts. He heard of powerful sorcerers, of dark rituals and unholy pacts, and of a relic that held the key to restoring the fragile balance of the world. "The artifact the Bigfoot spoke of," the elder murmured, his gaze meeting the tribal leaders with a profound intensity. "It is the only thing that can undo the damage that was done so long ago." The old man nodded, his expression grim. "Yes, my child, and that is why the demon you saw earlier is so determined to stop you from retrieving it." The tribal leader felt a chill run down his spine, the memory of the towering, menacing figure still fresh in his mind. "But how can I succeed where the Bigfoot failed?" he asked, his voice laced with despair. "I am just one man, and that thing was a force of pure evil." His grandfather reached out, grasping the tribal leader's hand with a strength that belied his frail appearance. "You are not alone, my child," he said, his voice filled with a quiet reassurance. "I am with you, and I will guide you on your journey to the mountain of the dead." The old man's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope sparking in their depths. You will come with me?" he asked, barely daring to believe the words. His grandfather nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Yes, my child," he said, his voice soft and gentle. "I have been waiting for this moment, for the chance to set things right, to undo the damage that was done so long ago." The tribal leader felt a surge of relief, but then a sudden realization struck him, and his brow furrowed in confusion. "But how is this possible?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "You've been gone for so many years, and now you're here, standing before me, as if you never left." His grandfather's expression grew somber, and he squeezed the old man's hand gently. "The truth is, my child, I have never truly been gone," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I have been elsewhere, in a realm beyond your understanding, watching over you and our people, waiting for the right moment to return." The tribal leader's eyes widened, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. "Elsewhere," he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" His grandfather's gaze grew distant, and for a moment the old man felt as if he were peering into the depths of a vast, unknowable mystery. "I am not of this world, my child," he said, his voice laced with a profound sadness. "I am a being of a higher plane, a guardian tasked with ensuring the delicate balance of the cosmos." The tribal leader stared at his grandfather in stunned silence, his mind reeling with the implications of what he was being told. A being of a higher plane?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and trepidation. His grandfather nodded, his expression solemn. "Yes, my child," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am not the man you once knew, but something more. And now I must reveal the truth to you, the full weight of the burden you bear." The old man felt a chill run down his spine, and he leaned forward, his gaze fixed intently on his grandfather's face. "Tell me," he breathed, his voice barely audible. His grandfather sighed deeply, his eyes filled with a profound sorrow. "The fate of the world rests upon your shoulders, my child," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. "For you are the one who must journey to the mountain of the dead and retrieve the relic that will restore the cosmic balance, lest all be lost." The tribal leader felt the air leave his lungs, his heart pounding in his chest. I don't understand," he stammered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "How can this be? Why me?" His grandfather reached out, grasping the old man's hands with a firm, reassuring grip. "Because you are the chosen one, my child," he said, his voice filled with a quiet conviction. "You are the only one who can succeed where others have failed. The only one who can set things right and save our world from the brink of destruction." The tribal leader stared at his grandfather, his mind reeling with the weight of this revelation. He had come to the forest seeking answers, but now he found himself thrust into the center of a cosmic battle, his people's very survival hanging in the balance. As the flickering firelight danced across his grandfather's weathered features, the old man felt a surge of both trepidation and determination. He knew in that moment that the journey ahead would be perilous, fraught with unspeakable danger and the threat of unseen forces that sought to destroy him. But he also knew that he had no choice. For the sake of his people, for the sake of the entire world, he had to succeed. He had to venture into the heart of the mountain of the dead and retrieve the relic that held the power to restore the delicate balance of the cosmos. And with his grandfather by his side, the tribal leader felt a glimmer of hope, a flickering flame that promised to guide him through the darkness to come. As the two men rose and prepared to set out on their perilous journey, the old man couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. The path ahead was shrouded in mystery, and he knew that he was about to face challenges beyond his wildest imagination. But there was also a sense of purpose, a steely resolve that hardened his gaze. For the sake of his people, for the sake of the entire world, he had to succeed. Failure was not an option. With a deep breath, the tribal leader turned to his grandfather, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "I am ready," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. His grandfather nodded, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Then let us be on our way," he said, his voice low and solemn. "The path ahead will be treacherous, but I will be by your side, guiding you every step of the way." The old man felt a surge of comfort at his grandfather's words, but he couldn't shake the nagging sense of unease that lingered in the back of his mind. There was still so much he didn't understand, so many mysteries that remained unsolved. As they set out into the darkness, the tribal leader couldn't help but wonder what other shocking revelations awaited them on their journey to the mountain of the dead. One thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. The tribal elder and his grandfather trudged through the shadowed forest, their footsteps muffled by the thick undergrowth. The old man's mind raced with the weight of what his grandfather had revealed, that he was not truly human, but a being from a higher plane, tasked with guiding the delicate balance of the cosmos. As they walked, the elder couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. If his grandfather was truly some kind of celestial guardian, what did that mean for the rest of their people? And what was this artifact that he was meant to retrieve from the mountain of the dead? An artifact so powerful that it could restore the cosmic balance. "Grandfather," the elder said, breaking the heavy silence, "you speak of this relic as the key to undoing the damage of the Great Flood, but how can a single object hold such power?" His grandfather's gaze was pensive, his expression grave. "The artifact is no ordinary trinket, my child," he replied, his voice low and measured. "It is an ancient, sacred object, imbued with the very essence of creation itself." The elder's eyes widened, the weight of those words sinking in. "Creation itself?" he breathed, his heart pounding. "Then it must be protected at all costs." His grandfather nodded solemnly. "Indeed, for if it were to fall into the wrong hands, the consequences would be devastating." The tribal leader felt a chill run down his spine. "The demon," he murmured, the memory of the towering, menacing figure still fresh in his mind. It was after the artifact, wasn't it? Yes, his grandfather said, his voice tense. The demon, along with other dark forces, will stop at nothing to possess the relic and use its power for their own malevolent purposes. The elder's brow furrowed in concern. Then we must hurry, he said, his pace quickening. We cannot allow them to reach the mountain of the dead first. As they pressed on, the forest seemed to grow darker, the shadows deepening around them. The elder couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes were following their every move. Suddenly, a rustling in the undergrowth caught his attention, and he tensed, his hand reaching for the hunting knife at his side. But before he could react, a figure emerged from the gloom, a woman, her features partially obscured by a hooded cloak. The elder's breath caught in his throat as he recognized her. "Grandmother?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and relief.
The woman's gaze locked with his, and for a moment, the tribal leader saw a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. Then, to his astonishment, she spoke, her voice soft and gentle. The woman's gaze locked with his, and for a moment, the tribal leader saw a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. Then, to his astonishment, she spoke, her voice soft and gentle. "My child," she murmured, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. "I have been waiting for you." The elder stared at her, his mind reeling. "But how?" he stammered, his gaze darting between his grandmother and his grandfather, who stood silently beside him. His grandmother's expression softened, and she reached out to gently touch his cheek. "There is much I must explain," she said, her voice laced with a deep sorrow. "But first, we must find a safe place to rest. The darkness is not the only threat that lurks in these woods." Exchanging a wary glance with his grandfather, the tribal leader nodded, his trust in his grandmother's judgment outweighing his confusion and trepidation. As they continued their journey, the elder couldn't help but wonder what other shocking revelations were in store for them. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small, secluded clearing where his grandmother gestured for them to sit. The elder complied, his gaze fixed intently on the woman before him, his mind racing with 1,000 unanswered questions. "Grandmother," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within, "please, tell me what is going on. How is it that you are here when we were told you had perished in the great flood?" His grandmother's expression grew somber, and she let out a weary sigh. "My child, the truth is, I have never truly been gone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I, like your grandfather, have been elsewhere, in a realm beyond your understanding." The tribal leader's brow furrowed in confusion. "Elsewhere," he echoed, his gaze darting between his grandparents. "What do you mean?" His grandmother reached out, grasping his hands in her own. "My dear, sweet child," she murmured, her eyes filled with a profound tenderness. "Your grandfather and I are not like you. We are beings of a higher plane, guardians tasked with maintaining the delicate balance of the cosmos." The elder stared at her, his mouth agape, the weight of her words sinking in. "Guardians," he breathed, his mind reeling. Then what are you?" His grandmother's expression grew solemn, and she squeezed his hands reassuringly. "We are ancient, powerful entities, my child," she said, her voice laced with a deep sorrow. "We have walked the earth for countless eons, guiding the course of humanity, ensuring that the balance of light and dark is maintained." The tribal leader's heart pounded in his chest as he listened, his gaze darting between his grandparents, who both wore expressions of profound gravity. "But now," his grandmother continued, her voice thick with emotion, "that balance has been shattered." The Great Flood was not a natural disaster, but the result of a devastating cosmic conflict, a war between the forces of creation and destruction, with humanity caught in the crossfire. The elder felt a chill run down his spine, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together in his mind. "The artifact," he breathed, his voice barely audible. "The one you and the Bigfoot spoke of. It holds the key to restoring that balance, doesn't it?" His grandmother nodded solemnly. "Yes, my child," she said, her grip tightening on his hands. "And that is why we must retrieve it,
before the dark forces that seek to control it can succeed. The tribal leader's brow furrowed in confusion. But if you and grandfather are these guardians, why did you not stop the Great Flood in the first place? He asked, his voice tinged with a hint of accusation. His grandmother's expression grew pained, and she averted her gaze. We were not strong enough, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The forces that orchestrated the flood were too powerful, too entrenched in the fabric of the world itself. We tried to intervene, but our efforts were thwarted, and the devastation was unleashed. The elder felt a surge of anger and betrayal, his hands clenching into fists. "You let our people suffer," he cried, his voice laced with anguish. "You let them drown when you had the power to stop it." His grandmother's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled him into a tight embrace. "I know, my child," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "I know, and I am so, so sorry. But now we have a chance to make things right, to undo the damage that was done." The tribal leader felt his anger subside, replaced by a deep sense of sorrow and resignation. Pulling back, he looked into his grandmother's eyes, his own filled with a mixture of love and disappointment. "What must I do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His grandmother's gaze grew determined, and she placed her hands on his shoulders. "You must go to the mountain of the dead, my child," she said, her voice firm. "Retrieve the artifact and use its power to restore the balance that was shattered so long ago." The elder felt a surge of fear, but he steeled his resolve, knowing that the fate of his people, and perhaps the entire world, rested on his shoulders. "And what of you and grandfather?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Will you not accompany me?" His grandmother's expression grew pained, and she shook her head slowly. "We cannot, my child," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "Our place is here, to guard the boundaries between the realms and ensure that the dark forces do not gain a foothold in this world." The tribal leader felt a surge of panic, his heart pounding in his chest. "But how can I succeed without you?" he cried, his voice laced with desperation. "The demon, the dark forces, they are beyond my power to defeat." His grandmother pulled him close, her embrace warm and reassuring. "You are stronger than you know, my child," she murmured, her voice filled with unwavering belief. "The power to restore the balance lies within you, waiting to be unlocked." The elder felt a glimmer of hope ignite within him, but it was quickly extinguished by a sudden, chilling realization. "If you and Grandfather Pinner accompany me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "then who will protect our people in your absence?" His grandmother's gaze grew distant, and for a moment the tribal leader saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "That is a burden I cannot bear to share, my child," she said, her voice laced with a profound sorrow. The elder felt a chill run down his spine, and he instinctively reached out to grasp his grandmother's hand. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling with dread. His grandmother's grip tightened, and she fixed him with a look of unwavering determination. "You must trust me, my child," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The fate of our people is in your hands now. You must succeed, no matter the cost." The tribal leader felt his heart sink, a sinking feeling of dread and foreboding settling in the pit of his stomach. "Grandmother," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, but she cut him off with a gentle squeeze of his hand. "Go, my child," she said, her eyes filled with a mix of love and sorrow. "Time is of the essence, and the path ahead will be perilous, but I know in my heart that you have the strength to overcome the challenges that await you." The elder Fevdorn, his mind racing with 1,000 unanswered questions, 1,000 unspoken fears. But as he gazed into his grandmother's eyes, he saw a glimmer of the unwavering faith and resolve that had always defined her. With a heavy heart, he nodded, his grip tightening around her hand. "I will not fail you," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. His grandmother smiled, a bittersweet expression that sent a chill down the tribal leader's spine. "I know you won't, my child," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. As the elder turned to leave, he couldn't shake the nagging sense of unease that lingered in the back of his mind. What had his grandmother left unsaid? What dark secrets were they keeping from him? With a deep breath, he steeled his resolve and pressed on, his footsteps quickening as he made his way towards the ominous peak of the Mountain of the Dead. Whatever lay ahead, he knew that he had to succeed, for the sake of his people and the very balance of the world itself.
The tribal elder pressed on, his footsteps quickening as he made his way towards the ominous peak of the Mountain of the Dead.
His mind was reeling from all that his grandparents had revealed: the cosmic struggle, the ancient artifact, the unseen forces that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the world. As he climbed higher, the air grew colder and the shadows deeper. The foreboding presence of the mountain seemed to weigh heavily upon him, like the gaze of some ancient, watchful entity. He paused for a moment, his breath misting in the chilled air. Looking back, he could just make out the distant outline of the forest, where his grandparents remained behind, their fate a mystery he dared not dwell on. Steeling his resolve, the elder pressed on, determined to reach the summit and retrieve the artifact that held the key to His mind was reeling from all that his grandparents had revealed: the cosmic struggle, the ancient artifact, the unseen forces that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the world. As he climbed higher, the air grew colder and the shadows deeper. The foreboding presence of the mountain seemed to weigh heavily upon him, like the gaze of some ancient, watchful entity. He paused for a moment, his breath misting in the chilled air. Looking back, he could just make out the distant outline of the forest, where his grandparents remained behind, their fate a mystery he dared not dwell on. Steeling his resolve, the elder pressed on, determined to reach the summit and retrieve the artifact that held the key to restoring the cosmic balance. But with every step, he felt a growing sense of unease, as if unseen eyes were watching his every move. As he neared the mountain's peak, the path grew treacherous, the rocky terrain treacherous and unforgiving. The elder's lungs burned and his muscles ached, but he refused to slow his pace. He knew that every moment wasted could mean the difference between success and utter disaster. Finally, he reached a narrow ledge that seemed to lead directly into the heart of the mountain. Pausing to catch his breath, the elder scanned the area, his eyes narrowed against the biting wind. And that's when he saw it, a glimmer of something, just barely visible in the shadows ahead. Squinting, he leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. As he drew closer, the object came into focus, and the elder felt his heart skip a beat. There, nestled in a small crevice, was a shimmering, otherworldly artifact, the very relic his grandparents had spoken of. The elder's breath caught in his throat as he reached out, his fingers trembling as they brushed against the artifact's smooth, almost luminescent surface. A surge of power seemed to radiate from it, filling him with a sense of both wonder and trepidation. Just as he was about to grasp the relic, a sudden, earth-shaking rumble caused him to stumble, his hand jerking away from the artifact. Heart pounding, the elder whirled around, searching for the source of the disturbance. And that's when he saw it, a massive, hulking figure emerging from the shadows, its eyes burning with a malevolent, inhuman intensity. The elder felt his blood run cold as the demon from the forest materialized before him, its towering form blocking the path back down the mountain. Panic surged through him, and he took a step back, his hand reaching for the hunting knife at his side. But before he could react, the demon let out a bone-chilling roar, its massive clawed hand lashing out with blinding speed. The elder barely had time to brace himself before he was sent hurtling through the air, his body slamming against the unyielding rock with a sickening thud. Pain seared through the tribal leader's body as he crumbled to the ground, his vision blurring.
Through the haze, he could see the demon advancing, its gaze fixed hungrily on the artifact. Summoning the last of his strength, the elder reached out, his fingers closing around the relic's cool surface. He knew, in that moment, that he had to protect it at all costs, even if it meant his own life. As the demon loomed over him, the elder braced himself, his grip tightening around the artifact. But just as the creature was about to strike, a blinding flash of light erupted from the relic, sending the demon reeling backwards with a shriek of pain and fury. The elder stared in awe as the artifact seemed to come alive, its surface shimmering and pulsing with an otherworldly energy. And then, to his utter astonishment, a figure began to take shape, emerging from the swirling light. It was a being unlike anything the tribal leader had ever seen, a humanoid form, yet radiant with a power that seemed to transcend the physical realm. Its eyes burned with a fierce, unearthly light, and the air around it crackled with a palpable energy.
The demon let out a guttural roar, its massive frame tensing as it prepared to attack. But before it could strike, the radiant figure raised a hand, and a wave of pure force slammed into the creature, sending it hurtling off the ledge and into the abyss below. The elder watched slack-jawed as the demon's agonized screams faded into the distance. And then, slowly, the figure turned its attention to him, its gaze filled with a mixture of compassion and profound sorrow. "My child," the being said, its voice resonating with a power that seemed to reverberate through the very air. "You have done well to retrieve the artifact, but your journey is far from over." The tribal leader stared up at the figure, his mind reeling. Who are you?" he managed to croak, his voice barely above a whisper. The being's expression grew solemn, and it knelt down beside the elder, its ethereal form radiating a comforting warmth. "I am a guardian, my child," it said, its voice low and measured. "One of the ancient beings charged with maintaining the delicate balance of the cosmos." The elder's eyes widened, the pieces slowly falling into place. Then you are like my grandparents," he breathed, a surge of hope flaring in his chest. "You can help us, can't you? You can stop the dark forces and restore the balance that was shattered so long ago." The guardian's gaze grew distant, and for a moment the elder thought he saw a flicker of uncertainty in those piercing eyes. I wish it were that simple, my child," the being said, its voice laced with a profound sorrow. "The forces that have disrupted the cosmic balance are ancient and powerful, and their reach extends far beyond the mortal realm." The elder felt a chill run down his spine, his heart sinking with dread. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling.
"If you are a guardian, surely you have the power to defeat them." The guardian shook its head slowly, its expression grave. "I cannot act directly, my child," it said, its voice tinged with regret. "My role is to guide, to provide the tools and knowledge needed to restore the balance, but the burden of the final confrontation must fall upon your shoulders." The tribal leader stared at the being, his mind reeling. But how can I succeed where others have failed?" he cried, his voice laced with desperation. "I am just one man, and these dark forces are beyond my comprehension." The guardian reached out, gently placing a hand on the elder's shoulder. "You are stronger than you know, my child," it said, its voice filled with unwavering conviction. "The power to defeat the darkness lies within you, waiting to be unlocked." The elder shook his head, his eyes filling with tears of frustration and fear. "I don't understand," he whispered, his voice breaking. "How can I possibly succeed when my own grandparents, your fellow guardians, were unable to stop the Great Flood?" The guardian's expression grew pained, and for a moment the tribal leader caught a glimpse of the profound burden that weighed upon the being. "Your grandparents," it began, its voice heavy with emotion. "They made a choice, one that has haunted them for centuries." The elder's brow furrowed in confusion. "What choice?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The guardian's gaze grew distant, and the elder could see the weight of the being's words as it spoke. "They chose to protect you, their only living descendant, rather than intervene directly in the cosmic conflict that led to the Great Flood." The tribal leader felt the air leave his lungs, his heart pounding in his chest. They chose me?" he breathed, his voice laced with disbelief. "But why? Why would they do that?" The guardian's expression softened, and it squeezed the elder's shoulder reassuringly. "Because you, my child, are the key to restoring the balance," it said, its voice filled with a profound sense of purpose. "You alone possess the power to defeat the dark forces and return the world to its rightful order." The elder stared at the guardian, his mind reeling with the implications of what he was being told. But how?" he stammered, his voice trembling. "I am just one man. How can I possibly succeed when my own grandparents failed?" The guardian's gaze grew intense, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. "Because you, my child, are the chosen one," it said, its voice resonating with a power that seemed to shake the very foundation of the mountain. "The artifact you hold is the catalyst, the means by which you will unlock the power within you and vanquish the darkness that threatens to consume this world." The tribal elder felt a surge of both hope and trepidation, his fingers tightening around the shimmering relic. "And what must I do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The guardian's expression grew solemn, and it gestured towards the narrow path that led deeper into the mountain. "You must go, my child," it said, its voice laced with a sense of urgency. "The dark forces are already in motion, and every moment you delay is a moment they draw closer to victory." The elder felt a chill run down his spine, but he steeled his resolve, knowing that the fate of his people, and perhaps the entire world, rested on his shoulders. Gripping the artifact tightly, he turned to face the guardian, his gaze filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Then I will go," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "And I will not fail, not this time." The guardian nodded, a glimmer of pride in its eyes. "I know you won't, my child," it said, its voice filled with a quiet confidence. "The power to save us all lies within you. Go now, and may the guardians of old guide your steps." With those words, the guardian's form began to fade, dissolving in a swirl of shimmering light that seemed to pour into the artifact the elder clutched in his hand. The tribal leader watched, awestruck, as the relic pulsed with a newfound energy, its surface glowing with an otherworldly radiance. And as he turned to face the path that led deeper into the mountain, the elder felt a surge of purpose and resolve. He knew that the challenges ahead would be daunting, the dangers unimaginable. But with the power of the artifact at his command, and the guardians of old watching over him, he was determined to succeed, no matter the cost. With a deep breath, the tribal elder stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the ominous peak that loomed before him. The fate of his people and the entire world rested on his shoulders, and he was ready to face whatever darkness awaited him in the heart of the mountain of the dead. The tribal elder gripped the shimmering artifact tightly as he pressed forward, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The guardian's words still echoed in his mind, reminding him of the immense responsibility that rested on his shoulders. "The power to save us all lies within you," the guardian had said, its voice filled with an unwavering conviction. Those words gave the elder a sense of purpose, a glimmer of hope that he could overcome the darkness that threatened to consume the world. As he climbed higher, the air grew thinner, and the shadows seemed to press in around him. The path was treacherous, with jagged rocks and yawning chasms waiting to claim the unwary. But the elder pushed on, his gaze fixed on the distant peak, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts and fears. Suddenly, a thunderous rumble shook the mountain, and the elder felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. Heart pounding, he whirled around, half expecting to see the towering form of the demon he had encountered earlier.
But instead, he saw a sight that filled him with both awe and dread. A massive, writhing cloud of dark energy, swirling and twisting as it surged up the mountain towards him. The elder's breath caught in his throat as he realized the true nature of this malevolent force. It was the embodiment of the dark powers he had been tasked with defeating, a tangible manifestation of the cosmic imbalance that threatened to consume the world. Without hesitation, the tribal leader raised the artifact, its surface glowing with a brilliant, otherworldly light. He could feel the power pulsing within it, a surge of energy that seemed to resonate with the very essence of creation. Focusing all of his will, the elder unleashed a blast of pure, radiant force, sending it hurtling towards the writhing cloud of darkness. The two energies collided but instead, he saw a sight that filled him with both awe and dread. A massive, writhing cloud of dark energy, swirling and twisting as it surged up the mountain towards him. The elder's breath caught in his throat as he realized the true nature of this malevolent force. It was the embodiment of the dark powers he had been tasked with defeating, a tangible manifestation of the cosmic imbalance that threatened to consume the world. Without hesitation, the tribal leader raised the artifact, its surface glowing with a brilliant, otherworldly light. He could feel the power pulsing within it, a surge of energy that seemed to resonate with the very essence of creation. Focusing all of his will, the elder unleashed a blast of pure, radiant force, sending it hurtling towards the writhing cloud of darkness. The two energies collided with a thunderous impact, sending shockwaves that reverberated through the mountain. The elder braced himself, his teeth gritted against the onslaught of power. He could feel the dark forces pushing back, their malevolent energy lashing out with a savage intensity. But he refused to falter, pouring every ounce of his being into the struggle. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed in his mind, a comforting presence that filled him with renewed strength. "You are not alone, my child," his grandmother's voice whispered. "The guardians of old are with you, lending you their power." The elder's eyes widened, and he could feel the presence of his grandparents, their ancient cosmic energy flowing into him, bolstering his defenses against the dark onslaught. With a renewed sense of purpose, the tribal leader redoubled his efforts, unleashing a blinding barrage of light that seemed to push the dark forces back, inch by agonizing inch. The struggle was fierce, a cosmic battle that shook the very foundations of the mountain. The elder could feel the strain of the effort, his muscles burning, his lungs aching for breath. But he refused to give in, his determination fueled by the knowledge that the fate of his people and the entire world rested on his shoulders. And then, just when it seemed as if the darkness would overwhelm him, the elder felt a sudden surge of power, a burst of energy that seemed to radiate from the artifact itself. Gasping in surprise, he watched as the relic began to transform, its surface shifting and morphing into a new, more powerful form. Tendrils of light erupted from the artifact, lashing out at the dark forces with a fury that left the elder awestruck. The dark cloud recoiled, its malevolent energy seeming to wither and shrink under the onslaught of the artifact's power. The elder pressed his advantage, pouring every ounce of his will into the assault, determined to vanquish the darkness once and for all. For what felt like an eternity, the two forces battled, the very air crackling with the intensity of their struggle.
But finally, with a bone-chilling shriek, the dark cloud began to disintegrate. Its essence scattered to the four winds. The elder watched, breathless, as the last remnants of the dark force dissipated, leaving behind a profound silence that seemed to settle over the mountain. Slowly, he lowered the artifact, his heart pounding in his chest. He had done it. He had defeated the darkness and restored the balance, just as the guardian had promised. But even as the elation of his victory began to sink in, the tribal leader felt a deep sense of sorrow, for he knew that the true cost of his triumph had yet to be revealed. With a heavy heart, the elder turned and continued his journey up the mountain, his steps slow and weary. He knew that he was nearing the end of his quest, and that the final confrontation with the dark forces was yet to come. As he climbed higher, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to deepen. The path grew more treacherous, with crumbling ledges and yawning chasms waiting to claim the unwary. But the elder pressed on, his grip tightening around the artifact, its power a comforting presence in the darkness. He could feel the energy of his grandparents, the ancient guardians, flowing through him, lending him the strength to overcome the challenges that lay ahead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the elder reached the summit of the mountain, a vast open expanse of jagged rock and howling winds. And there, in the center of the plateau, stood a towering, ominous structure, the very heart of the Mountain of the Dead. The tribal leader took a deep, steadying breath and approached the ancient, foreboding structure. As he drew closer, he could feel the weight of its presence, a palpable aura of power and danger that seemed to permeate the very air.
Steeling his resolve, the elder placed his hand against the structure's surface, closing his eyes as he focused his senses. He could feel the energy coursing through it, a vast, unfathomable power that seemed to consume him. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, a familiar presence that filled him with a mixture of comfort and trepidation. "My child," his grandfather's voice whispered, "the time has come. The final battle is at hand." The elder's eyes snapped open, and he gazed up at the structure, his expression a mask of grim determination. "I am ready," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. At his words, the ancient structure began to rumble and shake, its surface cracking and shifting as a vast yawning portal opened before him. The elder could feel the pull of the darkness, a malevolent energy that seemed to beckon him forward. With a deep breath, he stepped through the portal, his senses assaulted by a barrage of sights and sounds that were beyond his comprehension. The world around him seemed to twist and distort, the very fabric of reality warping and bending under the weight of the cosmic forces at play.
And there, in the center of this maelstrom of power, stood the demon, the same towering, menacing figure that had confronted him and the Bigfoot in the forest. Its eyes burned with a malevolent, inhuman intensity, and its massive frame radiated an aura of pure, unadulterated evil. The tribal elder felt a chill run down his spine, but he refused to falter. Gripping the artifact tightly, he stepped forward, his gaze locked with the demon's. "You have come, as I knew you would," the creature rumbled, its voice a deep, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of the cosmos. The elder steeled himself, his expression grim. "I have come to end your reign of darkness," he declared, his voice filled with a quiet determination. The demon let out a bone-chilling laugh, its massive frame tensing as it prepared to attack. "You are a fool, mortal," it snarled. "Your pathetic powers are no match for the might of the dark forces that I command." But the elder refused to back down, his grip tightening around the artifact. "We shall see," he said, his voice laced with a quiet confidence. With a roar of fury, the demon launched itself at the elder, its claws and fangs bared. But the elder was ready, channeling the power of the artifact into a blinding burst of light that slammed into the creature, sending it reeling backwards. The demon howled in pain, its massive frame crumpling to the ground. But even as the elder prepared to strike again, he felt a sudden, searing pain in his chest, a sharp, agonizing sensation that brought him to his knees. Gasping, the tribal leader looked down to see a dark, shadowy tendril protruding from his torso, its surface pulsing with a malevolent energy. Turning, he saw that the demon had regained its footing, its eyes gleaming with a twisted triumph. "Did you truly think you could defeat me, mortal?" the creature growled, its voice dripping with malice. "I have been playing this game for eons, and I will not be undone by the likes of you." The elder felt his strength ebbing, his grip on the artifact slipping. He knew, in that moment, that he was facing his final battle, and that the fate of the world hung in the balance. But as the darkness began to close in, the tribal leader felt the comforting presence of his grandparents once more, their voices echoing in his mind. "We are with you, my child," his grandmother whispered, her voice filled with a profound love and sorrow. "You must not give in to the darkness. The power to defeat the demon lies within you." The elder took a shuddering breath, his fingers tightening around the artifact. He could feel the energy pulsing within it, a surge of power that seemed to resonate with the very essence of his being. With a roar of defiance, the tribal leader lashed out, unleashing a blinding torrent of light that engulfed the demon, sending it reeling backwards in agony. The creature howled and thrashed, its massive frame crumpling under the onslaught of the elder's assault. As the demon's cries echoed through the twisted, distorted realm, the tribal leader felt a sense of triumph. But even as the creature's essence began to disintegrate, the elder knew that his own time was running short. Summoning the last of his strength, he turned his gaze skyward, his eyes filling with tears as he spoke the final words he would ever utter. "Grandfather, grandmother, I have done it. The balance has been restored." He paused, his voice cracking with emotion. "Forgive me, for I have failed you in the end." And with those words, the tribal elder felt his grip on the artifact slipping, the world around him fading to black. As the darkness closed in, he knew that he had fulfilled his destiny, that the fate of the world was now secure. And in that final moment, as his mortal life slipped away, the tribal elder felt a profound sense of peace, for he knew that his grandparents, the ancient guardians, would be there to welcome him home. The end.